Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. Welcome everyone to an episode of Outside the Panels. I'm your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and joining me this week on the show is a writer, executive producer, executive consultant of DC Comics, DC TVverse, yeah, the one, the only, the ultra talented. It is Mr. Marc Guggenheim. Marc, how's it going?
It's good. Thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. That was very, very nice.
Well, you know what? This is a bit of an honor for me. I'll tell you why. One of the back in the distant years of 2009-ish. My stepmom went in the hospital to have a hip replacement. When she came out, my wife went and looked after her, and I ended up going to a local comic book shop. First time in years. What do I buy? I buy some Batgirl, I buy some Batman, and I buy some Justice Society.
I know where you're headed with this. That, by the way, that is a wonderful blast from the past for me to hear about that. That's so great.
So I have your Justice Society run, and
thank you.
I love the Justice Society so much. I would rather read Justice Society than Justice League. That's how bonkers I am. Right?
I get that. I'm very similar. Yeah, I'm totally similar. So that makes total sense to me. That sounds completely sensible.
So to me, that book it kind of reintroduces the Justice Society. I've been out of comics for a while. Your name synonymous with the Justice Society, massive, right? And it leaves me thinking this is your first foray into comics. You've been, don't take this the wrong way, Marc, but you've been around some time before then, correct?
Yeah, I'm old. Yeah, I've been writing comics for 17 years now, believe it or not. And yeah, it's wild to think it's been that long. I remember just how difficult it was just to get my first, 2 gigs writing comics, and the thought that I've now written as many things as I've written is kind of astonishing to me. It doesn't really compute, doesn't really make sense. Yeah, there it is. There it is. That was, yeah, that was such a fun book. We had such great plans because we were planning on a really nice long run, and then New 52 came in and sort of. I know, yeah. Take nothing away from New 52 except for the fact that it just took opportunities away from us,
but not just yourself. I love the Steph Brown Batgirl book written by Brian Q. Miller. I thought that was possibly one of the funnest books around. But of course, Brian Q. Miller also
absolutely.
worked in TV. Yeah. Brian having been a story editor.
It's funny, actually. That's right. Right. And he also came in and I think had done a freelance for us. And his wife for the longest time was working with Greg Berlanti, and Greg produces all of the Arrowverse shows. So yeah, a lot of Brian Miller connections.
Arrowverse? What is this Arrowverse you speak of? I have no idea what you're talking about. Really?
Well, it's going away, sadly. Don't make me cry on this podcast. That was no one wants to tune in for
that. One of the things that resonates with me for the Arrowverse, especially Green Arrow or Arrow, the first season, was having your name attached to it, because it added an air of respectability to things. You know what I'm saying?
Wow, thank you. That's very, very flattering. That is really, really, really nice. I was thinking, is there another Marc Guggenheim who It could possibly be referring to me. But thank you. That's really, really kind of you.
I think when you get comic creators working on projects such as Arrowverse and the subsequent shows thereafter, I think as a fan, I feel a little bit safer in the journey.
Mm. Yeah,
You
no, I
respect,
totally appreciate it.
you respect the source material, right?
I tell you, we respect it, but also most importantly, we like it. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to do these adaptations, do these kinds of shows and movies, if you don't start from a place of love. You've got to like love and respect this source material. Whether you end up changing something is almost besides the point. It's like you have to come from a place where you're excited by it and you like it. Whereas I think a lot of people, particularly a lot of people at Warner Brothers for all the years leading up to James Gunn taking over, were ashamed, like literally ashamed that they had these characters in their library and, just couldn't wrap their brains around, what made them cool. Which I know sounds ridiculous, but I between Green Lantern projects with the Arrowverse sandwiched in between, I worked, on the DC side of the street for 15 years. And I worked under a lot of different regimes, both on the TV and the feature side. And I'm here to tell you, they didn't like this stuff, like at all. They just didn't get it. Yeah. And, if you don't like it, I think you're doomed before you even start, quite frankly. Kevin Feige is brilliant in so many different ways, but the thing about Kevin is that he loves Marvel. He loves comic books. He loves these characters. He has an inherent affection for them that I think is really kind of the secret sauce. That's the secret behind the secret of his success. So I'm very excited that James has the same love of comics that Kevin does. So that's a good sign.
So basically, what we're saying is Kevin and to some extent James, they're both like the Roy Thomas, but of the moviedom, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, they are very much acting as as editor-in-chiefs, essentially. And in some cases they're writing their own stuff, like James is writing the Superman movie, for example. But they're sort of like the showrunners of their cinematic universes. There's a bunch of different analogies I guess we can draw.
Yeah, there is. I'm going to bring up a subject that might be a sore point to some, and the reason why I bring this up is my wife loves this particular element. All right.
Okay, I'm ready.
She absolutely adores the Green Lantern movie.
Oh wow, she's the one. That's great, and please thank your wife for me. It's funny. People have said to me, honestly, like, it's an easy joke to make, but the truth of the matter is that I've heard, I've heard enough from enough people over the years who actually really do like that movie that I'm probably unduly harsh on it. And certainly if I compare it to a lot of superhero movies that came afterwards, it's not as bad as as its reputation. But at the same time, I think what sort of impacts me and Greg Berlanti and Michael Green is we knew sort of what it could have been. So we're always grading it against what was possible. For certain, we never anticipated an all CG costume. That not only didn't look good, but it took a lot of visual effects resources away from the rest of the movie. To the point when we were doing reshoots, every shot became a visual effect shot because every time he's in costume as the Green Lantern, you've got to bring out the visual effects artist. So it tied our hands in some really not so great ways.
I like the movie. I'm going to I'll say that right now. I have a true affection for the movie. There's one bit that I think to myself, if I was a movie man, I'd be like, And it's kind of it's in the Parallax hangar fight scene where Hal's giving up his ring.
Yes.
And then he chases around scrambling for it. Yep. I would have liked him just to sort of like hold his hand out and the ring use willpower to fly onto his. I think that would have been like for me. I would have gone like, way, like a proper fanboy, right? But
I will recommend a very simple Google search will surface our original draft. And that scene wasn't even in the original draft because, we had basically Parallax was Legion, and the whole third act was extremely different. But in terms of like moments that would make you sort of stand up and cheer, I definitely encourage you to check out that draft, thanks to the magic of the internet.
All right. There you go. Start your Google engines now, everybody. Right. Enough Green Lantern. So, Arrowverse. So, you've worked with Arrow. What an absolute great signing Stephen Amell was.
Yes,
Arrow.
completely.
Like, you look at the Marvel movies and you see Chris Evans, you see Hemsworth, you see Stark, and you're like, whoa, those are classic. Those are the right castings. Then you see Stephen Amell, and you're like, that is the right one.
Because it's a combination of, you need someone who embodies the character, but you also need someone who either is a TV star or has the potential to become a TV star. Television, especially broadcast television, is all about casting. And if you don't cast someone with star quality, I don't care how faithful you are to the source material, no one's going to watch. The actors got to have that X factor, that charisma. And Stephen obviously had it in spades. He was the very first person to come in to audition for any role. He was literally the very first audition that we watched. And it's funny, we had the auditions held in the Melissa Berman's office. Melissa Berman was the head of Greg's company at the time. And Greg had, his office sort of down the hall. And he's like, I'm going to go do some work. Just come get me when you see someone great. And Stephen did his read. We went down the hall, and Greg was like, wait, I just left you guys. Like, you couldn't possibly do something good, immediately. And we're like, oh, we saw Oliver. Like, we saw Oliver Queen. To the point where I couldn't even remember the other auditions. I couldn't tell you the name, except I do remember there was one guy who came in wearing his own green hood. Generally speaking, there are exceptions. Generally speaking, if an actor is relying on props or even worse, costumes in their audition, you just know you're in trouble. You just know it's not going to be a great audition. It was not. It was also like I felt so bad for anyone who had to come in and audition after Stephen. That was just anyone coming in after Stephen was wasting their time.
But it's not just Stephen. I mean, obviously, Stephen had a huge internet presence on Twitter, Facebook, the shirts. I think I've got 3 of his shirts. I've got the Sincerely one. I've got the one about mental health. I've got the season 9 T-shirt. We're, in my house, we're proper fans of Arrow and stuff. But it didn't just stop there. You had Diggle. You had Kate, who played the canary type character. Is she going to be? Is she not? She is, but no, she's not. That whole thing going on. And then, after you add in Felicity with the love interest, you then go and do something which is unheard of, and that's strike lightning twice with Grant Gustin. I mean,
I got to tell you, all the credit in the world goes to David Rappaport and Lindsay Baltasari, because they're the ones who not only, found Stephen and Grant and Melissa, and the list goes on, but also knew enough, like I said, Stephen was the very first person to come in for Arrow. Grant was the very first person to be brought in for Flash. Melissa was the very first person to be brought in for Supergirl. So in all 3 instances, David and Lindsay, they knew who it was.
I mean, Grant and Melissa had fame already from Glee, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Again, a different kind of fame, they had what I would call awareness, sort of pre-awareness thanks to Glee. But I don't think either one of them was like the star that they became. Again, it's not just finding someone great and finding someone talented, but it's also finding someone who, again, has that star potential, that star wattage, that X factor.
I was looking for, because I was going to do this like kind of comparison, because your new comic book Torrent, which we're going to talk about after the break, alludes to a couple of catchphrases. In fact, when I wrote the review for the book, I couldn't help but put in that she must be someone else. She must be something else. I couldn't resist it, right? I'm thinking to myself, I've got to put something like this to talk to Mark about. And I'm doing a Google search this afternoon to try and find stuff. And I came across this, and I will give shout outs to the guy who created it. But have a look at this, just for a case of what could have been. Let me see if we can get this going. This is, are you ready? This is Arrow Smallville style.
Yes, I love this. I'm so into this. Oh my God. This is fantastic. Oh my God.
And there's your name at the end. There you go.
This is terrific. I love this.
I want to give a big shout out to A-List Productions. Have a look at this on YouTube. It's Arrow Intro Smallville style. In fact, all the Arrowverse shows have one of these, so go look for it. It's on YouTube, so there you go.
They did manage to misspell both my first and last name, which is but that is really great. That is really well done.
It made me smile because my wife and I were going through a bit of a Smallville phase at the moment, and it's funny because we watched Smallville for so many years. We start like halfway through, because no one has time to watch 10 seasons of anything.
Tell me about
it. So we start, and then of course they've got their own Oliver.
Yes, they do.
So every time that we start watching it again, we both look to each other and goes, "Who will win? Would it be Justin or would it be Stephen?" And my wife looks and goes, "Stephen." Every time, and she's right.
Justin's a great actor, and I thought he was a great Oliver.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, definitely.
And by the way, like a lot of the Arrow crew came from Smallville. We rolled onto their sets, or at least their stages, I should say. We rolled onto their stages. Glenn Winter, our director of photography, Gord Verhul, our other director of photography. The art department, the stunts department, everybody. I mean, came from Smallville. We really drafted a lot off of that, show's legacy.
And it still works now. I think Smallville still works now.
Oh, totally.
Definitely. I have one more question before we take a break, and it's relating to Arrowverse. I love Arrow, and I loved seasons 1 through 5. The Magic one was a little bit. I know.
Everyone says that, and by the way, it's not my favorite season either. By any means.
If you threw Zatanna in there, I might have got it a bit more. Yeah,
we tried. It wasn't
more fishnets. Always more fishnets.
It wasn't for lack of trying. We lobbied hard for Zatanna in that season.
But then season 5 absolutely rocks brilliantly. At that point, we're up to date.
Yes.
Oliver you've seen his 5-year journey into hell, you've seen his purgatory, you've seen Lian Yu, China, all the other bits and bobs and stuff. It's a really bold choice to continue with the show, because at that point he's kind of hit the wall a little bit. He's kind of like, I spent 5 years, now I'm here, now I've had 5 years of success.
Yes. Yeah, and the show was we never in our wildest imaginings thought it would go past season 5. You know, we weren't even entirely sure we'd get up to season 5. You know, I mean, seriously, like, because, you know, it's like Greg and I did a show called Eli Stone where the first 2 episodes were very well, like, we did well ratings wise. And then the 3rd episode just went off a cliff. And it was really like this sort of object lesson in never count on your viewership. Never assume that if you start out at a certain number, you're going to be able to maintain that. You know, there really was never a point at which we sort of like, you know, crossed the finish, you know, crossed the goal line and spiked the ball. You know, it was like middle of season 1 when we did WonderCon in Anaheim, that I started to realize, oh, there's at least a fandom for this show, and there's a lot of love for this show. And that was the beginnings of starting to feel like, okay, we might be able to do this longer than, you know, than I originally thought. But yeah, the success of the show surprised no one more than it surprised us.
I have to be a little bit more honest there before we just take a quick break and get into Torrent. Back in what year? 2015, 2013. Back after season 1 of Arrowverse aired in the UK, I had something very seriously health-wise go wrong. Spent some time in hospital and came out of hospital. And it was like, right, I'm on sick leave from work, and my guys at work bought me season 1 Arrow as a sort of get well present to kind of cheer me up.
I like that. Those are good coworkers.
Yeah, definitely. They bought me an Iron Man book as well, but I got rid of that bit. And I have to say, every morning I watch 3 episodes.
Oh wow!
Get up, have a cup of coffee, my breakfast. And I watch 3 episodes back to back of Arrow. And this show, that's how much the show means to me. It's like entrenched in my recovery. It's been part of my life for so long. When it ended, I cried the same way when I cried when the West Wing ended. You know,
I love the West Wing.
I love the West Wing. Yeah,
love it.
If you get Martin Sheen on the pod, I'd appreciate that. That'd be cool. All right. So I just want to know when we talk about Arrowverse, just how much the whole thing, you know, absolutely means to me personally. So thank you for your efforts in that.
No, thank you for watching. We always said, you know, if there was no fans, if there was no audience, there'd be no show. So it's really you guys who kept it going. You know, very, very grateful for it.
Cool. Right, we're going to take a quick break for one of our other shows. We're talking with Marc Guggenheim, a DC legend. So it's time for the TDC ad, The Definitive Crusade. Having the Definitive Crusade for all your DC news, which includes now some movie stuff. Who'd have thunk it? Crazy, right?
That's very cool. That's really that's whoever did that sequence was very talented.
So that's a big shout out then to the random dude Josh, who does all our adverts. Thank you, Josh, for that one. There you go.
Yeah,
you should see the Crisis in the Toyverse. That one really rocks. Cool. If we have time, I'll show it later.
Yeah, please.
Right, here we go. So you also have a book out. The background has changed, and it's this beauty. This is Torrent. Look at that, it's written by you. Who'd have thunk that, eh? Excellent. With Justin Greenwood. Jumped ahead too many pages. Where we are, there we are. Rico Renzi is on colours. Keith Wood's on letters. What's the story about Torrent then, please, Mark? For those that don't know.
Well, the high concept is basically about a happy-go-lucky sort of wisecracking superhero. Think someone like Spider-Man, who, because of tragedy, ends up on a path of vengeance that turns her into a, violent, hardcore vigilante. Think, the Punisher or season 1 Arrow, actually.
Yeah. You have failed to see.
This book is probably the most Arrow-like thing I've done since Arrow ended. It's not like obviously a one-to-one comparison, but I found myself as I started working on it, exploring a lot of themes and ideas that we dealt with in Arrow. The line between hero and vigilante, the line between vigilante and villain. But it's very much, it's not a TV show in comic book form. It's very much a comic book. In fact, we're using a lot of, even just like you can see from this page, we're using a lot of comic book conventions to tell the story, narration and, even like the little, time and place boxes. We're using old school captions as opposed to legends. Really just trying to, sort of give it that kind of Bronze Age sensibility with still a modern feel. So it's been a blast. We've finished the first arc, which is 5 issues. Justin and I are working on the second arc. Just having an absolute blast with it.
The book is a little bit tongue in cheek in places.
Yes.
There are a couple of slogan phrase drops, shall we say? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Well, and a lot of that is really meant for humor, in large part because I wanted to start off with a very light touch, and a light tone, and as a way of drawing a comparison with where we're going to take Michelle, the protagonist, down. We're going to take her down a very dark path. So I wanted to start off with something that felt very lighthearted and very fun, and and again, aware of itself. I really like, especially superhero books these days. I really like superhero books that are, kind of like, wear their influences on their sleeve a bit. Yeah. And aren't afraid to acknowledge where they came from. And there's, one of the big influences here for us was Dark Knight Returns and Frank Miller's Daredevil run. And both, we've got references to both throughout the series. And even I think Justin's art is very Miller-esque, particularly in his action sequences. For my money, Frank Miller draws the best, figures in motion than anyone in comics. But Justin really, especially with this series, is giving him a run for his money. So it's been fun.
I think Justin's art's a little bit more character-esque than probably Frank. Yes. Frank's is probably more solid and straight-laced, whereas you've got the slipstream character here. It's all angles, and some of that will be to help accentuate the character's power, right? Because it's speed, so you expect like corners and stuff to show that velocity.
Well, it's very interesting. I completely agree with you. It's funny. Frank's art has become more caricaturesque over the years.
Absolutely.
Starting with like the Big Fat Kill in Sin City, moving on to The Dark Knight Strikes Again. You start to feel a little bit more of that angular, caricature-ish style that you're talking about, which, again, it's like there's, I'm a fan of all of Frank's work, regardless of what era it is. So, and like I said, a big influence for us here.
You mentioned it's the most Arrow thing that you've done since Arrow. And I'm not going to go too much into it because, you know what, this book's on the press now and I want people to go and buy the thing.
Thank you.
But there is a scene. Sorry?
I want them to buy it also.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
But there's a scene that kind of catapults Michelle through someone's ramifications. The catapults Michelle down the slippery slope, and it was that scene to me that was very Arrow. You know, the one
that's interesting.
it's kind of the one where Rennie in the show Rennie gets captured.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Well, I think
that to me was the mirror that I saw. I was like, oh, hold on.
there's a bit of it's strange. I mean, I feel like it's premature for me to sort of revisit Arrow. It's only been gone for like 3 years, but revisiting the themes is of interest to me. Especially since we did Arrow for 8 years under a lot of restrictions, both creatively and budgetarily and everything. The freedom of comic books is just a wonderful thing. It's nice to be able to tell stories without having to run it past a committee or worry how you're gonna actually afford to pull these things off.
And I suppose with your own character, it means you don't have to deal with anybody telling you what you can or can't do. If you want Michelle to die by issue 7, she can die by issue 7. She doesn't die by issue 7, right? Anyway, but you know what I'm saying. When you do like an Arrow,
I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. I have no comment.
No comment. What I'm trying to say is when you deal with those multimedia, cross-media characters like Arrow, Batman, Spider-Man, sooner or later you've got to put the toys back in the pen, right?
Well, there's certainly that for sure. But there's also just, when you do, network television, you get a lot of notes. There's a lot of oversight. There's a lot of, cooks in the kitchen, and a lot of, different points of view to navigate. So, one of the nice things about comics is there's more, not only more creative freedom, but you're dealing with fewer people. It's a tight collaboration, and with Torrent, it's just four people. It's, me, Justin, Rico, and Keith. And that's kind of nice, it's nice to have an intimacy, so yeah, it's been a really fun book. And I hope that the fun that we've been having making it translates to the books. I mean, so far the reaction's been pretty incredible. Like this has gotten some of the best reviews of my comic book career personally. So I'm excited that people are just digging it. They seem to read it and accept it for what it is, and they're buying into what we're trying to accomplish here.
You're multi-talented, to say the least.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
How different and difficult is it to flex those different muscles? Creating for TV, for example, must be different to writing for comic books, which can be collaborative because you've got the artist and letters and colorers. You're going from being an executive consultant back to being a writer. So instead of being the guy in the chair, you've got an editor in the chair. So how do you manage to juggle those different plates?
I'll tell you, I always say it's really like a muscle that you can train. When I started out in the business, my second year, I was working on Law and Order, and I had sold a romantic comedy as a feature. So I would start the day working on Law and Order, and after lunch I would work on the romantic comedy. And I found I couldn't switch. I couldn't go from a murder mystery, even with a lunch break in between, and do a romantic comedy. And now I do that every day, several times a day. It's a skill that you just sort of develop, and with practice, you just get good at it. So now I'll bop back and forth between different projects, all day long. I always feel like, experience is experience is experience. Training is training is training. Like, the more I write comics, the more it helps me in TV and film. The more I write TV and film, the more it helps my comic book work. Like, because of all my work in TV and film, and this is true, like for my work on like the Star Wars comics, for example, I don't need to rely on narration or caption boxes to, tell the story or get exposition out. I know how to do that just simply with characters talking, which is, what you have in TV and film. And I'm, in my work on the Star Wars comics, I've very intentionally brought that ethos over because I want the comic books that I write to feel like Star Wars TV and film, projects. So it's different, having different tools in your toolbox and knowing, which ones you want to use when.
Do you have a preference medium you like to work in? Do you prefer one over the other, or do you just kind of enjoy the challenge of it all?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, I'm very lucky that I get to work in all these different mediums, because the truth is, the grass is always greener. Like, and they each have pros and cons. And I do love writing comics because there's an element of writing a comic book script that is as much science and math as it is art. And a lot of times, like just building the story so that it goes from panel to panel, and there's a question or a slight cliffhanger, and you get the page turn at that moment, and this scene ending on this page. There's something. There is an element of comic book writing to me that's satisfying in the way completing a crossword puzzle is. And I don't have that in the TV and film work I do. So I mean, I do love the medium of comics. It's not just that I love superheroes, though I do love superheroes, but I love the medium. I love just the ability to tell any kind of story in basically a sequentially paneled, narrative. It just makes me happy. Also, there's also like nothing better than, waking up in the morning and getting a new page of art from whichever artist I'm working with. Like that's a great way to start the day. I
am very jealous. I just have to wait for when you put it all together, stick the staples in, and send it out to the comic book store. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big reader. I'm as much of a reader as I am a writer. Like, I always look forward to Wednesdays, and I always look forward to either going to Comixology or going to the comic book store, depending upon,
cool.
It's the, a new book of something that I'm enjoying. That's always, that's a fun thing to see.
What are you reading right now then? What is it that's on the Guggenheim pile to read?
I am reading Saga by Brian Vaughan, of course. I always look forward. I know, right? I always look forward to new issues of that. I am absolutely loving and blown away by Jason Aaron's Punisher run right now. It's one of those books that's like, where is he going with this? And every issue is incredibly, immensely satisfying. That's the book I keep telling people about. Like, if you're not reading it, you're really missing out. I mean, everyone knows about Saga, so I don't have to Brian doesn't need my endorsement, but the Punisher book is really, really terrific. I'm enjoying Zeb Wells's Spider-Man run enormously.
Let me jump in there. Sure. I am with you on this. I am enjoying his run immensely. I just wish Marvel Editorial would get off his back and stop doing all these bloody crossovers. Keep the story the same, man.
Well, at least they're his crossovers, though.
Yeah, I know,
but I get that. That's the age-old tension for both Marvel and DC. Like, how do you service the books, and how do you service the crossovers? And it's tricky. And I as a writer who's been in that situation before, it's a challenge. I feel like it's a good challenge. I always like to take a challenge and make it an artistic challenge and a creative challenge. But and I do think there's different types of art forms. There's an art form, I think, to doing a tie-in to a crossover. And there's an art form for how you keep your own story going while still servicing this other company-wide event. I find it fascinating and interesting, and it's its own chess game.
You guys managed it so well in the Arrowverse, though. You had multiple. You had Crisis of Earth X. You had the multiverse stuff. You managed to do that very well. For me, I don't mind them so much. I because that's part and parcel. I've been reading comics for years now, decades.
Well, also, with the Arrowverse, we're only doing it once a year, so
yeah, exactly.
You're not burdened by it.
That was my point. The fact that with the Spider-Man book, you've got the Dark Web, then you've got the
Judgment Day
stuff going off, and then you're like, oh man. And the Judgment Day Spider-Man book was gorgeous. It was brilliant.
Yes, it was. I agree. And again, that's a great example of that's a fantastic tie-in book. Like that, I thought was, exactly what I had in mind when I was saying, like, there's a way to do it, and you do it really well. And it was great. It was a moving story. It was very well, executed, emotional. But I hear you, because also there's now, again, just because of the way the market forces work, there's two types of crossovers now. There's the company-wide crossovers, and then there's the line-wide crossovers. And that's, exponentially increasing the number of crossovers that are out there. So it can be a challenge. But again, I don't think Marvel or DC is doing it because necessarily they want to. I think Marvel and DC is doing it because the market is telling them, the market's driving this. Trust me, no one in any company anywhere does things because they don't make money. You know what I mean? It's just that's just the nature of the game.
Cool. Mark, I know you've got stuff on. You're a busy guy, so thank you so much for spending this 40 odd minutes with me. I really do appreciate it. As I said at the start of the show, I am a huge fan of your work.
Thank you.
It's meant so much to me over the years in its various formats. So this has been a real treat for me. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
I really appreciate it too, and it's very humbling. So I really thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Guys, don't forget to check out the UCPN for all your favorite shows. You saw the advert earlier. It's the Definitive Crusade for all your DC stuff. And of course, if, like me, you're a little bit on the grey side, you can always check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show, where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. There you go. Mark, it's been a blast. I really appreciate it. And as for everybody else, adios.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.com, all about comic pop culture.